Hello? I think we're live now, maybe? There we go. Hello. Let's turn this on. There we go. Welcome to the first of hopefully many Muse Reads LGBT fiction. I've been kind of wanting to do this since we started the Tolkien stuff and it was so much fun. And I recently finished reading this book and it moved me to tears. So this is a good book to start with. Happy Pride, everyone. Hello, Lord Dalloway, Pablo, Clark, Jeff. Thanks for joining us. We'll give it a few minutes. What I'm reading today is a Chinese novel called Heaven Official's Blessing, as in kind of like a god. The main character is a god, a deity. It is set in a fantasy universe called a Zanzi, Zianzia novel. It's a kind of genre in China that's very popular. It's like historical fantasy. Everybody's got magic powers. There's demons and monsters and gods. It's based very heavily in Taoist and Buddhist tradition. Hello, Lobsel. Hello, Billy. You caught up to the live action. Nice. That'll be fun to watch, too. It's by the same author as that person that did the Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. This is her most recent novel, and having now read all three of her works, I can definitely say that each time she increases in quality, like, so much. She's clearly so talented, and now she's writing her fourth book. I'm very curious to see where it goes. So, in this universe, human beings are capable of cultivating their magic power to such an extent that they become so wonderful and amazing, they ascend to the heavens and they become gods. And that's what's happened to this main character, Zilan. I'm probably going to say, like, all the Chinese names so wrong. I apologize. If you know how to actually say them, please let me know. I am mostly going by the audio dramas I've heard / trying to read them. I probably am not saying them right, but I'm doing my best. He has ascended to heaven as a god, but due to unfortunate bad luck and circumstances, he's been thrown out of heaven twice already. But because he's so great and he's so awesome, he's now ascended for a third time. He's back in heaven, and everybody's like, oh, frick, is this dude again? God, this loser needs to go away. And it's the story of how he is seen as a bad luck god. Nobody likes him. He doesn't have any worshippers. He's the underdog, and he's going to end up falling in love with someone who actually does believe in him. It's really sweet, really heartbreaking. It's a love story that goes across 800 years of history. It's 244 chapters long. The chapters aren't incredibly long. Some of them are, but it's a lot, so it'll take a while to get through it. But hopefully you will enjoy it as much as I did. Hello, Rice. Welcome. We'll go ahead and get started. Well, let me make sure first. Is the music playing? Because I don't remember. Oh, yeah. Okay, good. We do have some music. What music is it? I forgot. It's been so long since I set up these settings. Properties. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Whatever. That could just be what's playing. I meant to find some of the music from the actual audio drama, and I forgot. So we'll do it another day. So we'll read a little bit and enjoy this amazing book I really like. Chapter 1. Heaven Official's Blessing. Among the gods of the heavens, there was a famous laughingstock known throughout the three realms. Legend has it, 800 years ago, there was an ancient country within the Central Plains called Xianli Nation. The ancient nation of Xianli had vast territory, abundant resources, and content citizens. The country had 4 treasures: delicate beauties aplenty, thriving arts and literature, treasures of gold and jewels, and last but not least, their renowned Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. This person, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, one could say he was a strange man. The Emperor and Empress considered him to be the apple of their eyes. They doted on him immensely, and would often proclaim, "In the future, my son will surely become a wise monarch, leaving a reputable impression for generations to come." Yet in regards to what came with royalty, of riches, power, and honor, the Crown Prince had no interest in any of them. What he was interested in, quoting the very words he often said himself, was, "I want to save the common folks." The young prince cultivated in earnest. Cultivated means trained his magic powers. Cultivation is the training of your magic powers. During this time, 2 short stories became widely circulated. The first occurred when he was 17. That year, the nation of Xianli had a magnificent offering to the gods parade. Although this tradition had been abandoned for numerous centuries, one could imagine the grandeur of the event through the surviving ancient texts and verbal stories. Offering to the Gods Day, Martial God Main Street. Both sides of the main street were overflowing with a sea of people. The aristocrats were seated on top of high buildings as they exchanged friendly chatter, while the imperial guards cleared the way with their impressive armor clinking. Young girls danced gracefully as their snow-white hands scattered flower petals like rain, filling the sky as far as the eyes could see. It made people question whether the dancing maidens were more beautiful or the flowers themselves. Melodious notes sounded from within golden carriages and floated throughout the whole imperial city. Behind honorable guards, 16 white horses with golden bridles walked side by side as they pulled forward a magnificent platform. Located on top of the tall, magnificent platform was the focus of everyone's attention. There stood the martial artist who would perform a show to please the gods. During the festive heavenly parade, the martial artist would adorn a golden mask, don splendid garments, and wield a sword in one hand. He would perform the role of the military deity in a millennium to have subdued demonic beasts. Martial god, heavenly emperor, Jun Wu. Being selected as the martial artist who would perform such a show should be considered the highest honor, and thus the selection criteria was extremely strict. This year, the one who was chosen was none other than His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. The entire nation was convinced he would become the most marvelous martial artist who performed such a performance since the beginning of time. However, on that day, something unexpected occurred. The guard of honor made his 3rd lap around the city walls, passing through one side with a dozen or more tall city walls. What? This book is translated by fans. Let me take the moment to say, the first 25 chapters are by one group, and then I guess they weren't able to continue it and a different group finished it. Sometimes there are parts that are less than clear. I'm not sure what this line is. The guard of honor made his 3rd lap around the city walls, passing through one side with a dozen or more tall city walls. Maybe they meant city guards? And I'm assuming they meant that he walked in with guards. Okay. During that time, the martial god on the magnificent stage was about to land a killing blow on the demon. This was the most exciting scene, and thus the people on both sides of the main street were fired up with passion. The people on the city walls were becoming more rowdy as they started outdoing each other, sticking their heads out to sea, struggling and shoving. At this exact moment, a young child fell from the top of the city gate tower. Ear-spitting screams pierced the heavens. Just when everyone thought the young child was about to splash blood onto the martial god main street, the crown prince lifted his head slightly before he leapt up and caught him. The people only had enough time to glimpse a bird-like white figure flit through the empty sky before the crown prince landed safely with the young child. His golden mask had fallen off, revealing the young and handsome face previously hidden behind it. In the next moment, a crowd of 10,000 began to cheer. The common people were delighted, but the Taoist ministers from the imperial household had some headaches. They would never have thought in a million years such a gigantic mistake would have occurred. It was far too ominous. Every lap the magnificent platform does around the imperial city represented a prayer for a year of the country's peace and prosperity. Now it had been interrupted. Wasn't that the same as incurring disaster? The ministers were worried to the point they lost hair like rain. After they pondered over the past and now how probable events might occur in the future, they invited the crown prince and tactfully suggested, "Your Highness, can you face the wall for a month to show repentance? You don't actually have to do it, just the gesture would show your intent." The crown prince smiled before replying no need. He explained his thoughts. "Saving people isn't something bad. How could the heavens fault me because I did the right thing? And if by chance the heavens do decide to blame you, then the heavens would be the ones who are wrong. Why should the people who are right apologize to the ones who are wrong?" The ministers were speechless. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince was exactly this type of person. incredibly gay and ready to fight God. I love him. He had never encountered anything he wasn't able to accomplish, and he had also never met anyone that didn't love him. He was always right, and he was the heart of the world. Thus, the ministers felt great pain in their hearts as they thought, "What the hell do you know?" However, it wasn't convenient for them to say more, and they didn't dare do it. His Highness wouldn't listen to them anyway. The second story took place in the year the Crown Prince was 17. According to the legends, on the south side of the Yellow River existed a bridge called Yinan Bridge, where a famous ghost wandered for many years. This ghost was utterly terrifying, dressed in ruined armor with flames from hell following its footsteps. Its whole body was covered in blood and pierced by numerous blades and arrows. Every step he took left behind traces of blood and fire. Every few years it would suddenly appear during the night. It would wander about at the foot of the bridge and stop travelers to ask them 3 questions. Where is this? Who am I? What will you do now? If one did not answer correctly, they would be completely swallowed up by the ghost in one bite. However, nobody knew the correct answers. Thus, after several years, this ghost already swallowed countless pedestrians. The Crown Prince heard about this matter one day while he was wandering about. After he found the bridge, he began to guard the foot of the bridge continuously until he finally met the ghost haunting the bridge one night. The ghost appeared in a flash, and sure enough, it was as eerie and terrifying as the rumors had claimed. It opened its mouth to ask the Crown Prince the first question, which the Crown Prince replied to him with a smile. "This is a human realm." However, the ghost replied, "This is the abyss." Beginner's luck. It was only the first question, but he'd already gotten it wrong. The Crown Prince thought to himself, he was going to answer the questions wrong anyway, so why wait for the ghost to finish asking? Thus, he pulled out his weapon and began to fight. The battle lasted until the sky became twilight and the land was covered in darkness. The Crown Prince was highly skilled in martial arts, while the ghost became even more daunting and dreadful. One man and one ghost fought on that bridge until the positions of the sun and moon had practically switched, before finally the ghost was defeated. After the ghost disappeared, the Crown Prince planted a flowering tree at the foot of the bridge. At that moment, a Taoist passing through saw him scattering a handful of garden soil to help escort the ghost to its next life. "What are you doing?" The Crown Prince then spoke his famous 8 words. "Body in the abyss, but heart in paradise." When the Taoist heard that, he smiled slightly, before transforming into a general deity clad in white armor. He stepped onto a magical cloud, summoned a strong wind, and flew into the sunlight. The Crown Prince only realized then that by lucky coincidence, he had unexpectedly encountered the heavenly god emperor himself, who had descended to the human realm to subdue demonic beasts. All the gods were already paying attention to this outstanding martial god after he leapt into the sky on the day offering the gods to Paradise Parade. After meeting him at the foot of the bridge, immortals began asking the emperor, "What do you think of this Royal Highness the Crown Prince?" The emperor answered with 8 words, "This child's future is limitless, impossible to measure." That same evening, the sky above the royal palace became unnatural as wind and rain caused havoc, and amidst the lightning flashes and thundering rolls, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince ascended into godhood. So basically, this guy was so cool and so awesome, the gods were like, "Oh, look at this, he's cool! We want him to join us. Come on, buddy." And he ascended to godhood. The most famous and important part of this is the part where the ghost said he was in the abyss, and the prince tried to help his soul pass on and said, "Body in the abyss, but your heart in paradise." Like, even if you're physically suffering, you can feel paradise inside. It's kind of a theme of this book, is finding happiness wherever you are. As long as someone ascends, the heavens would quake once. When His Royal Highness the Crown Prince ascended, it immediately made the entire heavens shake 3 times. To achieve immortality through one's efforts and insights was truly hard. It required innate talent, high cultivation, and the right opportunity. To be reborn as a respected god, more often than not, was an endless lifetime journey. Hello, Neil, and also Phil. I don't know if I said hello earlier. Thanks for joining us, folks. A youngster ascending into godhood and becoming an arrogant brat in the heavens wasn't something that hadn't happened before, but there were also plenty of people who bitterly exhausted their entire life cultivating, but still did not achieve immortality. Even if they came across a chance from heaven, if they didn't overcome the tribulation, they would either die or become a waste. Countless humans, like the grains of sand in a desert, lived a life of mediocrity from start to finish, unable to find their right paths due to their ignorance. So this Royal Highness the Crown Prince was undoubtedly the heaven's beloved darling. The things he wanted, there was nothing he could not obtain. The things he wanted to do, there was nothing that was impossible for him to accomplish. And when he wanted to ascend into godhood, he ascended at age 17. Originally, the Crown Prince was popular with his people. Coupled with how he was the Emperor's and Empress's greatly missed beloved son, they commanded temples in the Crown Prince's name to be built vigorously in many parts of the nation. Statues were erected and everyone assembled to pay their respects. The more believers he had, the more shrines were built, and thus he lived longer and became more powerful. As a result, in just a couple of years, Xianli's nation's Crown Prince flourished and reached the peak of his power. Until 3 years later, when Xianli descended into chaos. The reason for the chaos was due to the Emperor's cruel governing, which prompted a rebel army to rise for justice. However, though the fire of war had already started blazing in the human realm, heaven's godly officials could not meddle according to their wishes, unless it was a result of demons and ghouls overstepping or violating their boundaries. What happened must be allowed to happen. Disputes happened everywhere in the world, and every person believed their own actions were justified. If every deity interfered, today you will help and support your country, while tomorrow he will help his descendants take revenge. Wouldn't that result in immortals coming to blows frequently, something that might eventually cause all life to be destroyed? In His Royal Highness the Crown Prince's case, it was something he should keep out of even more, but he didn't care about that. He told Emperor Jun, "I want to save the common people." Though Emperor Jun had accumulated spiritual godly power for thousands of years, even he did not dare to lightly say those words out loud. When he heard the Crown Prince, his mood could easily be imagined. However, Emperor Jun couldn't do anything about him, and could only helplessly say, "You cannot save everybody." The Crown Prince replied, "I can." Therefore, he descended to the human realm with no second thoughts. The people of the entire Xianli nation naturally celebrated. However, since ancient times, folktales had tried to warn people of a truth. Oh boy. Okay. Fuck off. You can go away. Bye-bye. It's always good to know that the weirdos are showing themselves. Okay, let's see. The people celebrated. Folktales had long tried to warn people of a truth. The event of an unauthorized immortal descending to the human realm would not bear a good result. Thus, the fires from war did not die down, and instead began burning even more wildly. It wasn't that His Highness the Crown Prince did not do his best, yet it would have been better had he not done his best. The more he strived, the more complicated the war became. The people of Xianli were beaten till their heads fell and their blood flowed, suffering disastrous casualties. A plague swept through the whole imperial city, and rebels broke into the palace, ending the war. One could say when the Xianli nation had been struggling on whilst at death's door, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince had been the one to directly suffocate them. Yeah. This is very cool world building. Of the 3 books she's written, they're all entertaining, but I think this is her 3rd book. This is clearly where she has stretched her legs and really dove in to build a universe and done a really good job with it. It's very cool. Like I said, there's 800 years of history here, and you're gonna learn a lot more shit. It's really great. Ignore the weirdo in the chat who decided to tell me that they love my Silent Hill videos, but they gotta go because Make America Great Again. I don't care. After the nation was wiped out, the people suddenly realized something. So it turned out their Crown Prince deity was not as formidable or perfect as they had imagined. To put it more vulgarly? I've never seen this as this vulgar ly. I don't think I've ever seen it as an adverb. Wasn't he a useless figure who was unable to accomplish anything but liable to spoiling everything else? Unable to vent the suffering they'd felt losing both their homes and beloved ones, angry people covered in wounds rushed into the Crown Prince's palace halls. They pushed down his godly statues and burned his shrines. 8,000 temples burned for 7 days and 7 nights, burning until they completely disappeared. From then on, a martial god known for protection and peace faded away. and a demonic god who attracted disasters was born. When people said you were a god, then you were a god. If they said you were shit, then you were shit. Whatever the people said you were, that was what you become. That is what it was always like. Don't know what that has to do with anything she does. So, the commenter is likely commenting on the fact that the title of this video is, Muse Reads LGBT Fiction. So, you know, you can't be gay and make America great again. You know? I don't care. Idiots can go. I've been more and more tempted lately to just make obnoxiously queer and whatever videos just to chase off the assholes. Get rid of them once and for all. Alright. No matter what, His Highness the Crown Prince couldn't accept this fact. What he could not accept even more was the punishment given to him. Banishment. His cultivation was destroyed, and he was to be thrown into the human realm. From childhood, he had been spoiled 1,000 ways as he grew up, so he never suffered the pains and difficulties of normal people. Thus, this penalty made him fall from high in the clouds down into the mud. And in this mud, it was the first time he experienced starvation, poverty, the feeling of filth. It was the first time he did things he'd never imagined himself doing. Pilfering, robbing, violently cursing, abandoning himself to despair. Prestige entirely lost, self-esteem completely gone, he became as ugly as one wanted him to be. Even the most devoted attendants were unable to accept him changing this way, and chose to leave. Body in the abyss, but heart in paradise. These 8 words were carved almost everywhere in the stone tablets and boards of the Xianli nation. Had they not been almost entirely burned away in the war, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince were to see them again, he would be the first to smash them. Because the one who personally said the phrase had already proven that when his body was in the abyss, his heart was not in paradise. He ascended quickly and descended even quicker. The martial god's words and his graceful glance, having met both demon and god by chance on that bridge, they seemed as if they were things that had happened yesterday. The heavens sighed for a bit, for the things that happened in the past remained in the past. Many years passed when one day a loud sound shook the heavens. The Royal Highness the Crown Prince ascended to godhood for a second time. Since ancient times, gods who had been banished treated it as a setback leading to a total collapse before degenerating into a ghost or a demon. There were very little people who were able to reverse their fortunes and return after being banished. The event of ascending for a second time was something entirely worthy of only the vigorous and the strong. What was even more vigorous was that right after he ascended, he charged into the heavens to beat up and murder everyone in all 4 directions. Thus the Crown Prince had only ascended for about the time it took to burn 1 incense stick before he was kicked down again. 1 incense stick. It could be said it was history's quickest, most violent, yet brief ascension. If one said his first ascension was something to be praised, his second could only be called a farce. After these 2 times, everyone in heaven turned their backs on the Crown Prince. But although they abandoned him, they still felt on guard. After all, after he was demoted once, he was driven to such a state of desperation. Now that he was banished twice, would he become a demon and retaliate by abusing the common people? Who knew that after he was demoted again, he did not become a demon, and quite sincerely adapted to his banished lifestyle? There were no problems at all. The only problem was he was really too earnest. Sometimes he performed on the streets, masterfully singing or playing wind and bowed instruments of all kinds. Even breaking a giant stone on his chest was nothing difficult for him. Although they'd long heard that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince could sing and dance and was multi-talented, to actually see it in a situation like this really made one's mood become complicated. Sometimes he even industriously and conscientiously accepted rubbish. All the gods were astonished. So by accepted rubbish, they mean that he basically is homeless and he goes through the trash for food and belongings and stuff. They call him the trash god at one point, and it's a reference to the fact that he, digs through garbage for things because he's homeless. And hello, Zool, and other folks who've joined us. Welcome to a really lovely book about a god who's really fucked up his life. For things to become like this, it was really unimaginable. It was to the extent that nowadays, if someone told the other, you gave birth to a son who is Zanli's crown prince, that would be more malicious than cursing out their descendants. In any case, he was once the peerless beauty, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, who had been ranked as Heaven's official. To achieve this state, there really wasn't anyone else like him. The so-called nickname Laughingstock of the Three Realms was exactly due to this reason. After laughing, those who were more sentimental would perhaps sigh. The proud and aloof son of the heavens from the past had truly disappeared. His godly statues toppled over, his ancient nation was destroyed with not a single believer left. Slowly he became someone gradually forgotten by the world, thus no one knew where he'd wandered off to. To be banished once was already extraordinary shame and humiliation. To be banished twice, no one could ever climb up again. After many more years, there was suddenly a day when the heavens shook once again, disturbed by a loud noise. It was extremely violent as the ground quaked and the mountains shook. The altar lamps that burned day and night trembled as their flames danced violently. Godly officials who were awakened departed from their own palaces, rushing about as they asked, "Who is the upstart that's ascended? This place is shaking so much." Who knew, just after sighing, "How amazing!" at the next glance, all of heaven's gods felt as if they were struck by lightning over and over again. "Are you still not finished?" That famous weirdo, the laughingstock of the Three Realms, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince from the legends, he fucking ascended to godhood again! And that's the end of chapter 1. What lovely world building, isn't it? What a, it manages to be so heartbreaking and lovely and emotional and also, really irreverent too. Okay, so Z-I-E is pronounced she. So kind of like Banshee. Ji. Oh, you are fine, please. If y'all know Chinese, tell me how to pronounce these words, because I have a hard time understanding pronunciation guides. I never, even English ones, I look at them and I'm like, what does that mean? I don't get it. I don't understand the symbols. So, Shilian? Would that be his name? Okay. What? Okay, I think... We're getting to his character next turn. I think his name is then Shilian. Let me type it and see if y'all... Shilian, I think. And hello, Arisa. Welcome. Let me get the thing back. There we go. Okay, so now we're on to Chapter 2. Scrap Collecting Immortal's Third Ascension to Godhood. Scrap collecting, I think, being a translation of he digs through trash and collects things to use. They don't go into a lot of detail. They just kind of joke about how he collects garbage. But I'm assuming it's because he needed food or clothes and stuff. Anyway, so Shilian, I think is how it's said. Shilian. Oh, Jesus, I'm going to pronounce all these. There's like 12 names coming. Okay, forgive me. Let me know how to say things. Some of these I think I know how. I'm so much better. Years of listening to Japanese anime has given me, like, an understanding of how to guess what they, how to say stuff. Do not have that history with Chinese, so I'm learning from the beginning here. Congratulations, Your Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. Hearing those words, Shilian raised his head and smiled before he spoke. Also, actually, how do I... Yeah, so this is the cover image. Shilian is the guy in white. The main romance, who you will not meet yet, is the guy in red. Where's my... come on, how do I make the slideshow go to the next picture? Because I put a picture of Shilian. How do I go to the next one? Or maybe if I just delete that. Go away, image. Oh, well, there he is! That's our boy! Make it a little smaller. There's official artwork because an anime is coming out later this year, or a donghua in Chinese is coming out. Alright. Thank you, but may I ask what exactly you are congratulating me for? Ling Wen Zejun stood with her arms crossed as she said, "Congratulations for placing first on the list of heaven officials most anticipated to be demoted and banished to the mortal realm." Shilian replied, "No matter how you say it, it's still first place, but I think if you're congratulating me, then it should be a position worth being happy about." Ling Wen stated, "Yes, if you're first, you can get 100 merits." Shilian responded immediately, "Next time, if there's another list like this, by all means, put me on it." Ling Wen asked, "Do you know who's in second place?" Shilian thought for a moment before replying, "That's too hard to guess. Based on strength, I alone ought to be able to take the top 3 places." Ling Wen answered, "That's more or less right. There isn't a second place. The moment you started, others could only see your dust with no hopes of catching up." Shh. I dare not accept the honor. Who was the first place winner from previous years? Ling Wen stated, there wasn't one, because the list was created this year. More accurately, it was created today. Xi Lian blanked for a bit before asking, based on what you said, this list wasn't created specifically for me, was it? Ling Wen responded, you can think of it as luckily winning merely because you were coincidentally in time for it. So basically she's saying, guess what, you showed up today, and we created a list of people we think will get banned today, and you're the only one on it. This story's so fun. Ling Wen continued to say, do you know why you would seize first place? Xi Lian replied, everyone expects it. Ling Wen explained, let me tell you the reason. Please look at that clock. She lifted her finger to point, and Xi Lian turned to look in that direction. Where one could see, there was what one could see was extremely beautiful. Gazing into the distance, one could see a palace made out of white jade, pavilions and kiosks, immortal clouds curling about with flowing streams and flying birds. Xi Lian took a long time before asking, did you perhaps look in the wrong direction? Where's the clock? Ling Wen replied, I didn't point in the wrong direction. It's there. Have you seen it yet? Xi Lian looked carefully before truthfully saying, I don't see it. Ling Wen responded, it's right for you not to see it. Originally there had been a clock there, but it was shaken off when you ascended. This character is really sassy. It's hilarious. She's basically saying, you see the clock that's there? You don't? That's right, because you destroyed it when you showed up. That clock was even older than you. Nevertheless, it had a lively and vivacious character. Every single time someone ascended, it would ring a few times to cheer them on. But on the day you ascended, it rang like it had gone crazy, unable to stop. Only when it fell down from the clock tower did it calm. However, when it fell down, it smashed into a passing heavenly official. Xi Lian said, then, are they okay now? Ling Wen replied, no, they're still being repaired. I am referring to the heavenly official who was hit. Ling Wen replied, the one who got hit was a martial god. So there's different types of god. Martial god basically means fighting master, warrior god. Ling Wen is a, what do they call her? She's like a office worker. She does the file work and stuff. She's not a warrior god. She is a office god. Yeah, the dialogue in this story is really great. Let me move this real quick. Okay, there we go. The one who got hit was a martial god. He flipped over his hand on the spot and split the clock into two halves. But now, please look over there at that golden palace. Do you see it? She pointed again, and Xi Lian's gaze followed her finger once more. He saw a vast area covered in mist and clouds before seeing the top of a resplendent palace roof made of gold glass. Xi Lian said, I see it this time. Ling Wen responded, if you see something, that means there is something wrong. Originally, there had been nothing there. When you ascended, many heavenly officials' golden palaces shook to the point their golden pillars toppled over, and their glazed roof shatters. Some palaces couldn't be repaired in a short period of time. Without any better options, many people improvised and built new temporary places. I'm the one to blame? You're responsible for it. Xi Lian asked to confirm, did I happen to offend many heavenly officials the moment I came up? Ling Wen answered, if you can redeem yourself, then perhaps you won't. What can I do to redeem myself? That's easy to answer. 8,880,000 merits. Xi Lian smiled again. Ling Wen said, of course, I know even 1/10 of that is something you can't take out. Okay, merits are basically kind of like prayers, if I'm remembering correctly. So he would have to have like 8 million followers give him their prayers for him to be able to pay back all the money he owes. Hello folks jumping in. Sorry, I'm just looking over who's joined us. Alright, where was I? Okay. Xi Lian replied in a frank and genuine manner. How do I say this? Although I'm truly sorry for the inconveniences, even if you requested a 10,000th of that, I still wouldn't be able to take it out. The conviction of believers in the secular world could be converted into a heavenly official's spiritual power. Every incense stick they burned as offering was called merits. His smile disappearing, Xi Lian seriously asked, would you be willing to punt me down from here with one kick and then give me 8,880,000 merits? Ling Wen stated, I am a literature god. If you want someone to kick you, you ought to find a martial god. The harder you get kicked, the more merits you'll receive. Shi Lian heaved a deep sigh. Allow me to think about what to do. Ling Wen patted his shoulder and sighed. Don't lose your head. When you encounter a mountain, there will always be a way through. Shi Lian responded, in my case, when the boat reaches the pier, it will naturally sink. If it was 800 years ago, during Xian Li, is that how it's said? Xian Li? Xian Li's nation most prosperous time, 8,880,000 merits weren't a big problem. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince would wave his hand and give them, not even blinking over such a loss. But the present was now different from the olden days. In the secular world, all his temples had already long burned away, with not a single one remaining. He had no believers, no incense, and no worship. It was needless to say more. He had nothing, not a single thing. One person squatted at the edge of the immortal city's main street while having a headache for quite some time, before he seemed to remember something. It had already been almost 3 days since he'd ascended, yet Shi Lian had not entered the spiritual communication array. He had forgotten to ask Ling Wen for the password. The spiritual communication array is basically Discord for the gods? I love it. It's like, I am chat. Anyway, the heavenly officials who had ascended united together to create a spiritual communication array. It was possible for them to use their divine sense and immediately communicate with each other in the array. After ascending, it was imperative for new gods to enter it. However, one must know the password to be able to locate the particular array. It had already been 100 years since Shi Lian had entered the last spiritual communication array. Thus, he certainly hadn't remembered the password. So he released his divine sense to look around before he found an array that seemed to resemble it. But when he casually entered, he was immediately hit in all directions by violent and excited voices so powerful, he became a bit unsteady. Place your bets, no takebacks. Come bet how long our Royal Highness the Crown Prince can persevere before he'll have to descend once more. I bet 1 year. 1 year's too long. Last time he only lasted the time span of an incense stick. Perhaps this time he'll persist for 3 days. I'll place a bet for 3 days. 3 days. Don't, you dunce. 3 days has almost gone by already. Are you gonna be okay? Xian Li left the array. Wrong place. Definitely couldn't be that one. The deities in heaven were all big-shot heavenly officials who oversaw their own regions, and each one of them was a household name among a great number of people. Because they were all heavenly officials who had seriously cultivated to ascend, they were dignified and usually quite reserved. More often than not, their speech and behavior had an air of arrogance. There would only be one, him, who, because he had not been excited the first time he had been too excited the first time he had ascended, had went and grabbed every heavenly official in the spirit communication array to make his greetings. Xian Li had been incomparably earnest as he had introduced himself, and thoroughly detailed introduction was unparalleled. After he had retreated from the previous array, he began randomly searching once more. Finally, he entered another array. After entering this time, Shi Lian relaxed a bit as he thought, it's quiet here. This is probably the right one. At that moment, he heard a voice lightly say, Your Royal Highness the Crown Prince has returned again? At first, this sound was comfortable to hear. The voice was soft and the tone was gentle. However, if one listened to it closely, they would realize the voice sounded extremely cold, and the speaker's tone appeared indifferent as well. Thus, it seemed the gentleness harbored evil intentions. Originally, Shi Lian had wanted to enter the array in a restrained and well-behaved manner. Silently lurking there was good enough. However, since someone was already looking for him to chat, he couldn't pretend to be mute and deaf. He was also extremely happy a heavenly official in heaven was still willing to take the initiative to talk to him, a god personifying pestilence. Thus, he quickly replied, That's right! Hello, everyone. I returned again. How would he know that after this one question and response, every heavenly official in the array, at that moment, all perked up their ears? The heavenly official continued to speak in a leisurely manner. This time, your Royal Highness the Crown Prince's ascension made a big commotion, huh? Within heaven, it could be said that monarchs were walking around everywhere, while heroes were as common as the water flowing in the rivers. Clark wants a short recap. Sure. Okay, this part is a little bit detailed. Basically, he's in heaven chilling, and he was like, you know, I should really meet everybody and check in, and so he logged into the heavens, DMs. He got on God Twitter and said, hey everybody, how you doing? And all the gods are like, what the fuck, he's really back? Oh my god. Nothing else has really happened yet. All that past history happened. He's finally ascended for the 3rd time, and he's kind of trying to figure out his place in heaven. There's a lot of, like, I don't know, kind of he has thoughts that kind of run off in this direction and that direction, where he thinks about back when he was first there, back when he was then there, but really nothing's happened other than he's just walking around heaven and thinking about heaven and how he's gonna, do it this time, and nobody likes him. If one wished to become an immortal god, they must first become an outstanding individual. In the mortal realm, people who achieved and accomplished many goals, or people who had a lot of talent, had a large opportunity to ascend. As a result, it wasn't exaggerated to say that princesses, princes, and generals were not a rare sight to see. Who wasn't a proud child of the heavens? However, everyone was still extremely polite and courteous to each other, calling one another your majesty, your highness, or general lord. They would say whatever sounded more complimentary. But for the prior words spoken by the heavenly official, the title he used did not sound like a polite gesture. So right now, basically, they're saying that all the different gods in heaven are probably heroes. They're princes. They're incredibly powerful figures from the real world. And usually they're very reserved and respectful, but not toward Shilian, because nobody likes him. Although Shilian had been a crown prince and others had greeted him thus, his tone didn't have one bit of respect. It sounded like he was trying to use a needle to stab someone. There were many other heavenly officials who'd been genuine crown princes within the array, and those few greetings simply made goosebumps appear on their backs, as if they were uncomfortable from head to toe. Shilian also heard the ill intentions in the other's voice, but he did not want to make a scene. Thinking to himself he would escape, he replied with a smile, it was okay. However, the heavenly official didn't give him a chance to escape. He spoke in a voice that was neither warm nor cold. Your Royal Highness the Crown Prince is okay? My luck was not that good. Suddenly, Shilian heard a whisper from Ling Wen. She only said a single word. Clock. Shilian instantly understood. This was the martial god who got smashed by that clock. So, in the beginning, when he first met Ling Wen, who's basically like the secretary of the heavens, said, hey, welcome back to heaven, here's your pamphlet, welcome. When he showed up, his power was so great, it destroyed a lot of stuff, and this particular god who's so pissy at him is the one that had a giant clock tower fall on him. So that's why he's angry at Shilian. If that was the situation, then the heavenly official being angry wasn't something without reason. Shilian had always been extremely good at apologizing, and thus immediately said, I've heard about the incident with the clock. I'm extremely sorry. Please pardon me. The other snorted once, making it impossible for anyone to tell what he meant by it. There were many martial gods within heaven, and among those, quite a few were new upstarts who had ascended after Shilian left. This was why he was unable to pinpoint which god this was just by listening to his voice. However, one couldn't apologize without knowing the other's name. Thus, Shilian went to the heart of the matter. Excuse me, may I ask how I should address you, distinguished one? The moment he said those words, the party became silent. It wasn't only the other god who became silent. The entire array seemed to freeze, as if a puff of stagnant air slapped everyone in the face. On the other side, Ling Wen whispered to him once, Your Highness, though I don't believe you should recognize the other person after talking to him for so long, I still want to remind you. That is, Zuan Zhen. I don't know how to say that, but they're not going to call him that for long. Remember, a lot of people have different names based on titles or personal names, family names, that kind of thing. This character is actually called Mu Qing. He choked up in a flash before finally reacting as he sent back a message in slight shock. This is Mu Qing? Zuan Zhenjun, or Mu Qing, was a martial god who kept watch over the southwest. He had 7,000 temples, and in the mortal realm, his reputation was illustrious. This Zuan Zhenjun, who was the personal name Mu Qin, used to be a deputy general in the palace halls of Xian Li's country's crown prince 800 years ago. So they were friends when they were human. That's why he's like, oh, dude, it's Mu Qing? Oh my god, bro! Remember? It's me! You don't like me, do you? You don't. No, because no one likes him. Ling Wen was also very shocked. It couldn't be that you really didn't recognize him. Xian Li replied, I really didn't. Back then, he didn't talk to me like this. In addition, I can't remember the last time I met him. If it wasn't 500 years ago, then it was 600 years ago. I've almost completely forgotten what he looked like. How could I recognize his voice? The spirit array remained silent, and Mu Qing didn't make a single peep. As for the other heavenly officials, on the one hand, they pretended they weren't listening, while on the other hand, they waited for someone to continue talking with fervent anticipation. All the gods are huge gossips. Hey, Rondez! When it came to these two, it was relatively awkward. After so many years, many rumors had been passed on, so everyone almost understood everything. In those days when Xian Li had been the precious Xian Li crown... No, it's rough for me. The country's name and the prince's name are somewhat similar, so I keep reading them wrong. Xian Li is the country. Shi Lian is the prince. Okay. He cultivated in Huangji Temple. That Huangji Temple was Xian Li's country's imperial Taoist temple. Their selection standards for disciplines were extremely strict. Mu Qing came from a poor background, and his father was a sinner who had been beheaded. A person like that simply did not have the qualifications to enter the temple as a disciple. As a result, he had no choice but to come to someone who did odd jobs. In the temple, he was in charge of sweeping the floor for His Highness, or delivering tea and water to him. But Shi Lian saw he was assiduous, and thus asked the ministers to make an exception and receive him as a disciple. His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince's words carried great weight. Because of the prince's will, only then was Mu Qing allowed to enter the temple to cultivate. And after Shi Lian ascended, he appointed him as a general and took Mu Qing along with him to the mortal city. Yeah, so what's happening here is, he's realized that one of the gods he's met in heaven was his friend as a human. What he was a very poor person who had no future. The prince saw him and was like, this guy's cool, let him be a warrior, and he got to train with him at the temple because the prince was so nice. And when the prince ascended, he took the guy with him. But of course, when he descended, Mu Qing stayed in heaven and became a god. So the awkward history here is they knew each other. He used to be a poor human who worked for the Shi Lian. Now they're reversed. Shi Lian is the disgraced god, and he's the powerful warrior god. When the Xianli nation was wiped out and Shi Lian was demoted to descend into the mortal realm, Mu Qing did not follow him. Not only did he not follow Shi Lian, but Mu Qing didn't say a single word in defense for him. The crown prince was gone anyway, so he was free. He found a blessed place and began to painstakingly cultivate like crazy. Not many years later, he withstood the heavenly tribulations and ascended himself. Back then, one was in the heavens and another was on the ground. Now, there was still one in the heavens and one on the ground. It was just that the two people's circumstances were thoroughly reversed. At one end, Ling Wen said, "He's really angry." Shi Lian replied, "I guessed that." Ling Wen responded, "I'll go say some other things. Quickly take the opportunity to leave." Shi Lian said, "There's no need. If we pretend nothing happened, everything will be fine." Ling Wen asked, "No need? Just looking at you guys makes me feel awkward." Shi Lian replied, "I'm still okay, Arisa, that's basically me right now. I have also gotten into not just Chinese novels, even though I've fallen in love with this genre. Light novels in general. I've also been reading Number 6, which is a Japanese light novel that's also gay. Very good. Really enjoying it. Okay. For Shi Lian, any situation was okay, as long as he didn't die. He didn't have much, but he could definitely still lose a lot of face. Asterisk. Okay. Something I've learned from reading these books. There's a lot of different cultural differences and stuff. Face refers to respect, your dignity. If you have a thick face, that means you're very dignified. If you lose face, that means you've been embarrassed. So he could lose a lot of face means he could be embarrassed pretty badly. He had done really awkward, embarrassing things before. He could lose face. That's fine. It's something that you see a lot in these type of novels. So basically, it means losing face means being embarrassed, being ashamed. He had done plenty of things that were many times more awkward than this, so he really felt okay in his heart, but who would have thought he shouldn't have said that so early? Shi Lian had just said the words "still okay" when he heard a voice roar, "Who the fuck dismantled my golden palace? Come out!" This one roar made the gods listening within the array feel as if their scalps were going to explode. Though their stomachs were already flipping, everyone held their breath as they listened in rapt attention. They didn't make a single peep as they waited to see how Shi Lian would respond to the loud cursing. But nobody expected that instead of something exciting, they would hear something even more thrilling. Shi Lian hadn't even started talking before Mu Qing spoke first. Mu Qing laughed twice. Ha ha. Oh, hey, Akatsuki. If you have a thick face, it can also mean you're acting shameless. Yeah, that's another, a different book describes a character as like that a lot. I guess thick face can also mean like you don't care Like, you have enough self-confidence to not care about what other people think of you. It depends on the context, I think, so we'll deal with it as it pops up. I feel bad for folks just jumping in, but basically, we're in fantasy China. The main character has ascended as a god again, and nobody likes him because he's a bad fortune god, basically. Okay, so Mu Qing laughed twice. Haha. The person who came coldly said, "You were the one who tore it down. All right, wait for it." Mu Qing faintly replied, "I did not say it was me. Don't randomly spray blood at people." The other person asked, "Then why are you laughing?" Mu Qing answered, "It isn't like that. What you've said is just funny, that's all. The person who destroyed your golden palace is in the array. You can go ask him yourself." When things evolved to this degree, no matter what, Shi Lian felt too embarrassed to escape now. He coughed dryly before saying, "It was me. I'm sorry." The moment he spoke, the person who came later also became silent. So basically, he entered into the god chat room and was like, "Hey, it's me." And Mu Qing, his old friend, said, "You freaking dropped a clock on my head with your showing up here." And Shi Lian was like, "Oh shit, it's my old friend Mu Qing. This is awkward, but I don't want to run away." Then a new god showed up and said, "Hey, who the fuck destroyed my palace with their ascending and being so powerful?" And Shi Lian, first Mu Qing laughed at him, because those two, you're going to learn, have a rivalry. They hate each other. And Shi Lian was like, "Oh shit, I know this guy too. Oh no, everybody hates me!" By his ear, Ling Wen transmitted a message. "Your Royal Highness, that is Nan Yang." Shi Lian responded, "This time I recognized him. However, I don't think he's recognized me." Ling Wen replied, "No, it's just he spends most of his time in the mortal realm and less in the city. Thus, he didn't know you descended again." Nan Yang Zhenjun was the martial god who oversaw the southeast. He was popular and had nearly 8,000 temples, receiving the love and respect of the common people. In addition, his personal name was Feng Xin. 800 years ago, he was the first general of Xianli's Crown Prince's Palace Hall. Feng Xin was a devoted and loyal person. He was Shi Lian's imperial bodyguard ever since he'd been 14 years old. Feng Xin grew up with the Crown Prince, entered the heavens with him, was demoted with him, and was banished with him. Unfortunately, he was unable to endure those 800 years with Shi Lian. In the end, they separated on bad terms and parted ways, never to see each other again. So, in other words, the first two gods he's met upon returning are old friends that he now kind of has beef with because of all the trouble that's happened the last 800 years. One of them was a poor boy who attracted the prince's attention and was able to ascend to the heavens because of him, but abandoned him when he was demoted. The other was his childhood best friend and bodyguard, who went with him to the human world when he was banished, but bad things happened and they parted on bad terms. So our story thus far, they gave us a kind of snapshot of why this god has become the god of misfortune, all the bad luck that's happened to him. He's now ascended to heaven for the third time, walked in and everybody's already like, "Oh fuck, it's this guy again." He's met two old friends who are now enemies, and he's accidentally hurt both of them. He destroyed the clock tower that dropped on the one guy, he destroyed the other dude's house, and he's sitting there like, "Oh no, this is horrible, oh no." This guy has the worst luck. I love it. Oh man. So yeah, Shi Lian leaves chat. The story will be a little less confusing once we get past this portion where eventually he goes back to Earth and he's kind of just doing his own thing. But right now they're introducing us to a lot of characters who will end up being important further down the line. So it's kind of like a conga line of characters walking through like, hey, we're gonna show up later, bye! Yeah, so if it's a little overwhelming, don't worry. It'll get more easily understandable later. I heard about Persona 4, Akatsuki. I'm glad it wasn't just rumors. It's good. Something's good happened. There's also supposed to be some video game announcements tonight. Supposedly maybe some Square Enix stuff, but we'll see. I'm gonna keep reading for now if folks are still into it. How long have we been going? Where's the timer? What the heck? Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah. I'm still having fun, and I have nothing better to do right now, so. Remove that. There we go. Okay. Chapter 3. Scrap Collecting Immortals' Third Ascension to Godhood. A former superior master was reduced to a laughingstock of the three realms, someone who didn't have incense offerings, temples, or believers. The two retainers, who had once sat underneath him, had both passed heaven's tribulation, ascending and becoming strong martial gods who oversaw their own regions. With circumstances like this, it was impossible for people to not wonder more. If you asked Shi Lian to choose whether Feng Jin or Mu Qing made him feel more awkward, he would say, they're all okay. However, if you asked bystanders whether they wanted to see Shi Lian fight Feng Jin or if they wanted to see Shi Lian fight Mu Qing, everyone would make different choices according to their tastes. After all, there were abundant reasons for either pair to fight. It was hard to pick which was the more interesting option. Therefore, when there was no response from Feng Jin's side for a long time because he'd unexpectedly stopped talking, everyone felt utterly disappointed. Meanwhile, Shi Lian collected his tail, beat himself down a bit as he said, I didn't anticipate making a commotion like this. It wasn't deliberate. I've inconvenienced everyone. Ming Qin responded in a cool manner. Oh, then that was indeed quite coincidental. Coincidental? Shi Lian also thought it was really too coincidental. How could the clock fall right onto Mu Qing, while his ascension also happened to destroy Feng Jin's palace? For bystanders, it was as if he was deliberately taking revenge. However, Shi Lian was the type of person that should there be 1,000 cups of wine with only one poisoned, Shi Lian would always manage to pick the poisoned one. But there was no way to control what other people believed, so Shi Lian could only say, I will try my best to compensate for everyone's golden palace and other losses. I also hope you may give me some time. One didn't need a brain to understand that Mu Qing definitely wanted to continue his sarcastic remarks. However, since Mu Qing's golden palace didn't suffer any losses, and even the clock that fell onto him was sliced into 2 halves, considering to be overbearing would be unsightly and something beneath his identity. Therefore, Mu Qing also concealed himself before falling silent. When Shi Lian saw the terrible problems had left by themselves, he quickly fled. He was still genuinely pondering over where he was supposed to get those 8,880,000 merits the next day, when Ling Wen invited him to go to her palace hall. Yeah, this poor boy needs help, but don't worry, he's, So, I didn't really describe the main plot of the romance, but basically what we're gonna get to is, this poor boy has no believers, nobody helping him, until he does finally meet the last believer. Just wait. Ling Wen was the heavenly official in charge of managing heaven's personnel. When mortals wished to get a step ahead in their careers, they would worship her. From the ground to the very top, the whole palace hall was filled to the brim with official documents and scrolls. This kind of scene was utterly shocking, one that would make anyone shiver with fear. As Shi Lian walked forward, he saw every heavenly official coming out of Ling Wen's palace hall drag an exceptionally tall stack of paperwork. Their faces were pale, and if they didn't have an expression that looked as if they were about to collapse, they had a look of numbness. When the two finally entered the palace hall, Ling Wen turned around and got straight to the point. Your Highness, there's a matter in which the Emperor would like to request your help. Are you willing to assist him and lend a helping hand? In heaven, there were many people who had the titles Zhenjun or Wanjun. However, only one person could be called the Emperor. If that person wanted to do something, there would never be the need for him to beseech other people. This was why Shi Lian stared blankly for a bit before he replied, What matter? Ling Wen handed him a scroll before explaining, Recently, the North has had a large number of zealous worshippers repeatedly praying for blessings. It can be assumed they are not passing their days peacefully. So the romance is with the last believer? Yeah, well, okay. Yes, the romance is with the last believer, who is the Demon King. I'm gonna read this story till we get to him, because I really want to introduce everybody to him. It's such a lovely story. These so-called zealous worshippers generally referred to 3 types of people. Rich people, that paid money in order to burn incense and build temples for gods. The second category consisted of missionaries who would preach to bystanders. Last but not least, the third type of zealous worshippers were those whose body and mind were thoroughly doused in faith and belief. Among them, most of these worshippers belonged to the first category, since in this world, the rich were like carps passing through rivers. The third category had the least people, but because if one was truly able to get to that layer of faith, then their degree of proficiency was surely quite high, and they wouldn't be far from ascending themselves. The people Ling Wen mentioned were clearly from the first category. Ling Wen continued to speak. At present, the Emperor cannot attend to the North. If you are willing to take his place and make the trip, when the time comes, regardless of how much offerings these zealous worshippers make, everything will be allocated to your altar. What do you think? Shi Lian received the scroll with both hands and said many thanks. This was evidently Junwu helping him out. For those who probably do not remember, because his name's been mentioned once. Junwu is the Emperor of all heaven. Junwu was evidently helping him out, but instead he'd flipped it around and made it sound as if he was asking Shi Lian for help. How could Shi Lian not see through that? However, he couldn't find more fitting words to express what he thought in place of the 2 words he'd just said. Ling Wen replied, I'm only responsible for handling these affairs. If you want to thank someone, you should wait for the Emperor to return before personally thanking him instead. Oh, do you need my help borrowing any magical artifacts? Shi Lian responded, there's no need. Even if you gave me a magical artifact, once I go down, I won't have any spiritual power, so I won't be able to use it. Shi Lian had been beaten down twice, so he'd lost his spiritual power. It was easy to cope in the heavens, the place where all immortals assembled. After all, spiritual power was abundant, and the source wouldn't dry up, so there was casually some he could grab for use. However, once he returned to the mortal realm, he would be powerless. If he wanted to fight with magic, he could only make do by finding someone who he could borrow energy from. It was extremely inconvenient. Ling Wen pondered for a moment before saying that it would be best to borrow a few martial gods to assist you and lend a hand. The current martial gods either didn't recognize him, or they didn't like him. Shi Lian understood that thoroughly, so he responded, there's no need for that. You won't be able to borrow anyone. However, Ling Wen seemed to have taken it into consideration and said, I'll give it a try. There wouldn't be a difference whether she tried or not, therefore Shi Lian didn't approve or oppose her words and allowed Ling Wen to try. As a result, Ling Wen entered the spirit array before announcing in a bright tone, Everyone, the Emperor has an important task to be handled in the north and urgently needs people. Which martial god highness can lend out 2 martial officials from their palace halls to help? The moment her voice faded, Mu Qing's floaty voice emerged. I've heard the Emperor isn't in the north right now, so I'm afraid you're borrowing people for His Highness the Crown Prince, right? Shi Lian mentally thought, are you keeping guard at the array all day long? Basically, his old friend that doesn't like him anymore was just chilling in the chat room waiting for him to show up. Like, fuck that guy. The moment... Ling Wen was on the same wavelength as him. Although she wanted to slap Mu Qing, who was hindering her work, right out of the array, she started speaking with a smile. Why am I always seeing you in the array these 2 days? Seems like you've been stealing time to slack off and you're quite idle. Congratulations. Mu Qing replied in a light tone, my hand is injured, so I'm recuperating. Every heavenly official there thought, mentally, in the past it would be nothing difficult for that hand of yours to split a mountain in half. So would hacking a foolish clock into pieces do this to you? Originally, Ling Wen had wanted to deceive 2 people to come working before explaining the details. But not only did Mu Qing guess the details in one try, he said them out loud. With the circumstances now, it was certain she wouldn't be able to find anyone. Sure enough, no one answered her inquiry. Shi Lian also couldn't believe anyone would come forward and thus told her, you see? I said I wouldn't be able to borrow anyone. Ling Wen responded, if he hadn't said anything, I would have been able to. Shi Lian smiled. Those words of yours have been as if you were carrying a pippa, but concealing half its face, beautifully blurring the scene to some degree. People would have thought they were coming to help the Emperor, so of course they would come. But when they come and realize they were going to have to work with me, I'm afraid there'd be trouble. How could we work like that? In any case, I'm used to being alone. And I'm not missing an arm or a leg, so let's just go with this, huh? Thank you for your trouble. I'll leave now. Ling Wen was also powerless, thus she cupped her hands in a salute before saying, all right. I wish your highness's journey go smoothly, and may the blessings of heaven's officials be upon you. Shi Lian replied, all taboos are off. Waving his hand, he left in a confident and carefree manner. 3 days later, in the mortal realm, the north. I was wondering about something... with the anime Collection of Small Kingdoms. Talking about... So this is by the same author, but not the same universe? Or at least, we don't really deal with the human cultivation families. A lot of people like to imagine they're in the same universe, but the two do not meet in the fiction. Yeah, I don't know that there was an emperor in the cultivation, the other story. Demon cultivation. By the side of a major road, there was a small tea house. The storefront wasn't big, and the shopkeepers were simple folks. But goods were expensive because the scenery was good. There were mountains and bodies of water. There were people in a city. They had everything. Not much of everything. Not much, but just right. Located in the middle of such scenery, if one were to come across the tea house by chance, it would create a wonderful memory. Modao Zushi. Yes, we've been watching that anime in the Discord. Same author, different universe, but a lot of fans like to imagine them together. The tea house's tea sommelier was exceedingly idle, since he currently didn't have any customers. Thus, he moved a small stool to the door of the store and began looking at the mountain, the water, the people, and the city. He was happily looking when from afar he saw a Taoist clad in white walking over. The Taoist was covered in dust, looking as if he'd been walking for a very long time. When he came closer, he walked past the small tea house before suddenly stopping in his tracks and slowly retracing his steps. The Taoist tilted up his bamboo hat with his hand before raising his head. He took one glance at the store before he started speaking with a smile. Chance Encounter. This name is interesting. So the store is named Chance Encounter. Although the person had a tired appearance, he had a face full of smiles. It made the people looking at him unable to stop the corner of their own mouths from curving up. The Taoist asked, "Excuse me, may I ask if Mount Yujun is nearby?" The tea sommelier pointed in a direction for him before replying, "It's in this region." That person breathed out, and for once he didn't spit out his soul with that breath. In his mind he finally thought, "I've arrived." This person was precisely Shi Lian. He left the Immortal City that day. Originally, he'd decided the location he would descend to. He'd wanted to fall near Mount Yujun. Who would have thought that when he left without care and jumped down without care, his sleeve would get caught on a carefree cloud? Yes, it got caught on a cloud. Even Shi Lian didn't know how his sleeve got caught on a cloud. In any case, he tumbled around at a lofty, high altitude, and by the time he rolled down, he had no idea where he was. After 3 days on foot, he finally reached his original planned arrival location. Thus, for a short while, he felt extremely moved. Entering the tea house, Shi Lian picked a table beside the window before asking for some snacks. He finally got seated after his previous difficulties when he suddenly heard endless wailing and the sound of beating drums from outside the room. Shi Lian turned his gaze toward the street before seeing a group of people from all ages escorting a crimson-red marriage sedan as they walked past the tea house. This procession was surrounded by an extremely odd air. At first glance, there seemed to be relatives delivering the bride, but if one looked closely, they would notice how the faces of these people all had solemn expressions of grief, anger, dread. The only emotion that wasn't present was joy. Whatever the case, it didn't have the appearance of a wedding. However, contrary to that thought, everyone was wearing red flowers as they played wind instruments and beat all their drums. The situation was really too strange. That tea sommelier carried a copper teapot in his hand and raised it high to pour some tea. He'd also seen this scene, but he shook his head before leaving. Shi Lian had followed that strange, departing procession with his eyes, before pondering for a brief moment. He was about to take out the scroll Ling Wen had given him to look over one more time, when he suddenly felt something dazzling flit by. The moment Shi Lian lifted his head, a silver butterfly flew past his eyes. The silver butterfly was sparkly and translucent, looking pure and limpid. As it flew around in the air, it left behind bright traces. Shi Lian couldn't help but reach out a hand toward it. The butterfly was extremely intelligent. Not only was it not frightened, it even temporarily stopped on his fingertips, both wings glittering and beautiful to the utmost degree. Under the sunshine, it looked as if it was a fragment of an illusion. After a moment, however, it flew away. Shi Lian waved at it, something that could be considered his goodbye, but when he turned back, his table had 2 more people sitting there. The table had 4 sides. One person sat on the left and another the right, each taking one side. Both people were teenage boys who looked about 18 or 19. The one on the left was taller, with facial expressions that looked quite defined and brightly handsome. Within his gaze was an arrogant and obstinate light. The right side had very light skin. He looked delicate and pretty, but refined. However, his expression looked somewhat overly cold and apathetic, an appearance that made it seem as if he wasn't too happy. In fact, the color of the faces of both people didn't look that great. Shi Lian blinked his eyes before asking, "You two are..." The person on the left replied, "Nan Feng." The person on the right replied, "Fu Yao." Shi Lian mentally thought, "I'm not asking for your names." At that moment, Ling Wen suddenly transmitted her voiceover. She said, "Your Highness, there are 2 small martial gods from Middle Heaven who are willing to help. They've already gone down looking for you, so they should have arrived by now." Aw, hey, Delvin. The so-called Middle Heaven was naturally relative to Upper Heaven. The heavenly officials of Heaven could be divided into 2 categories, ones that had ascended and ones that didn't. The heavenly officials of Upper Heaven had all ascended by relying on themselves. There were only about 100 within the whole of Heaven, and they were each extremely precious. But within Middle Heaven, the deities there were the ones who were brought up by appointing them as deputies. Strictly speaking, their full names ought to be called fellow heavenly officials. However, when most people called them, more often than not, they would leave the word fellow out. Since there was an upper and middle heaven, was there a lower heaven? There wasn't. Actually, when Shi Lian ascended for the first time, there had been a lower heaven. At the time, heaven was still divided as upper and lower heaven, but everyone found a problem. When they introduced themselves and opened their mouths to say, "I am from lower heaven so-and-so," it sounded truly unpleasant. With the lower word existing, it made them feel inferior. Among the deities of Middle Heaven, there was definitely no shortage of talented people. Their spiritual power was rich and strong, and they were each excellent, well-known figures. The only difference between them and real heavenly officials was merely how they lacked experiencing a heavenly tribulation. But who knew when that day when the heavenly tribulation they were waiting for would come? Therefore, people proposed to change a single word, turning introductions into "I am from Middle Heaven." This was much more pleasant to hear, though they both had the same meaning. In short, after the change, Shi Lian had gotten used to it after quite a while. So, basically, there's an upper heaven where the the gods are. Middle heaven is where the demigods are. They haven't gone through a tribulation, which is basically like a quest or a trial that once they've conquered it, they become a real banging god and they get to go to upper heaven. So these two are basically teenage kids from middle heaven, haven't proven themselves yet, who have come to help out. I'm gonna be right back. I gotta refill my water. Alrighty. Okay. Let's see. Xian Li looked at these two small martial gods, with one face slightly more unpleasant than the other. It was unlikely they were willing to come forward and help. He couldn't help but ask, Ling Wen, I don't think they look like they came down to help me. Instead, it looks more like they want to retrieve my head. Did you deceive them to get them to come? Okay, so for to help out folks who are a little lost or just jumped in, the main character has descended to Earth, to the mortal realm, because he's been given a quest by the Heavenly Emperor to try and figure out what's going on in this one town, where bad stuff's happening, basically. He's arrived in town, and two demigods have shown up to kind of offer their help. He's kind of like, it doesn't look like these guys came to help me willingly. Kind of looks like you bullied them into come helping me, but these two are now going to help him out. So they are about to start sort of the Monster of the Week quest, where every so often there's going to be a smaller storyline where the main character is trying to figure out something that's going on, and that's what's going on now. He's in this village where all these weird wedding processions keep happening, and he's like, what the frick is up with this? What the heck? Alright. Did you deceive them to get them to come? Unfortunately, it seemed his question wasn't transmitted out. He was also now unable to hear Ling Wen's voice by his ear. This was probably because he was so far from the immortal city, and it was been so long since he descended, his spiritual power was all depleted. Shi Lian was incapable of doing anything else, so he gave a smile to both the martial gods before saying, was it Nanfeng and Fu Yao? To be willing to come and help me, let me thank you in advance. The two of them only nodded their heads, both appearing to have a somewhat lofty attitude. It seemed the martial gods they were under had a rather illustrated reputation. Shi Lian had the tea sommelier bring 2 more cups of tea. Picking up his cup, he scraped the tea leaves before casually asking, which highness's palace are you under? Neng Fen replied, Nangyang Palace Hall. Fu Yao replied, Zhu Yan Palace Hall. Okay, to explain that, in the previous chapter, remember the 2 angry gods who used to be his friends when he was human, and then they don't like him now because they had fallouts? These 2 demigods are the servants of the 2 angry gods. So, these 2 are employees of his former friends that don't like him anymore. So he's realizing this, and he's, oh no, this is not good. This truly made one feel frightened. Shi Lian swallowed a mouthful of tea before asking, your palace's generals allowed you to come? Both of them responded, "My palace's generals don't know I came." Shi Lian thought for a bit before asking again, "Then do you know who I am?" If these two small martial gods came here because they were muddle-headed and thus deceived by Lin Wang, then after helping them, they would return to get scolded by their general. Something like that wouldn't be worth it. Nang Fen replied, "You are His Highness, the Royal Crown Prince." Fu Yao said, "You are the correct path for the human world. You are the heart of the universe." Shi Lian choked once before he asked Nan Feng in an uncertain manner, just now did he roll his eyes?" Nan Feng responded, "He did. Let him scram." Nan Feng's... Oh, God, I keep... One character's called Nan Yang, one's called Nan Feng. Feng is the student, or the demigod of the other one. I keep mixing their names. Nan Yang's relationship with Zhua Zhen wasn't good. This wasn't a secret. In other words, the two old friends of the main character also don't like each other at all. When Shi Lian heard of that matter, he wasn't surprised. This was because even back then, Fen Xing and Mu Qing's relationship hadn't been that great. In those days, he had been the master and they were his retainers. The Crown Prince said, "Don't argue, you guys have to become good friends." So the two of them endured and refrained from becoming hostile with each other. When they became extremely unhappy, at most they used words to stab the other side. Muddling until today, there was no longer a need to be so sincerely courteous. Thus, even the worshippers from the southeast and southwest didn't look upon each other in a positive light, while the Nan Yang Palace Hall and the Zhua Zhen Palace Hall had more hatred for each other. The two before him were a prime example. So in other words, anyone associated with the two gods that used to be friends hate each other. Their worshippers, their servants, their palaces, they all hate each other, and they also are not that fond of the main character because of bad things that happened in their past, which we will learn eventually. Fu Yao smiled sarcastically as he said, "Ling Wen said if you were willing, you could come. So for what reason would I scram and leave?" The word voluntary, saying it with his expression, didn't look convincing. Thus, Shi Lian said, "Let me confirm once. Are you two really volunteering to do this? If you're not, by all means, don't force yourself." The two of them both said, "I willingly volunteered." Looking at these two deeply depressed faces, Shi Lian mentally thought, the words the two wanted to actually say were, "I want to die," right? In short, Shi Lian began, "Let's discuss the real work. You guys already know why we came to the north, so I won't start explaining from the beginning." The two of them both said, "We don't know why." Shi Lian was incapable of doing anything and could only take out the scroll before saying, "Then I guess it would be best if we explain everything from the start." It was said many years ago in Mount Yujun there was a bride and groom who were about to be wed. The couple loved each other very much. The bridegroom waited for the procession that would deliver the bride, but even after waiting a long time, he didn't see the bride arrive. The bridegroom began to feel anxious and thus began looking for the bride's family. The result was his father-in-law and mother-in-law informing him his bride had long since set off. The two households reported this to the officials before they began looking in all directions. However, from beginning to end, they never found her. But even if she'd been eaten by a fierce beast in the mountain, there should have been remains of an arm or a leg or whatnot. What was the justification behind her disappearing into thin air? Thus, it was inevitable that people harbored suspicions that the bride herself didn't wish to marry, resulting in her colluding with the procession before escaping. But who would have known after a few years another new couple married and the nightmare repeated itself? The bride disappeared again. However, this time she didn't leave without a trace. On a small road, people found a foot that something hadn't quite finished eating. Aha! So now we've come to our first monster of the week. Hello, Candy Dreams. So our main character is investigating to find out why all the marriages in this town go horribly wrong. And we're on to chapter 4. Hello, everyone that's joined us. We are reading a Chinese historical fantasy gay novel. The main character is a kind of disgraced god trying to earn back his respect. Nobody really believes in him or likes him, but he's doing his best. And he's going to meet someone that actually does really like him and believe in him, and it's going to go really great. And we're going to get to him, I think, in this chapter? Maybe the next one. Anyway. Things started to get out of hand ever since then. In the 100 years afterwards, a total of 17 brides went missing in the Mount Yujun region. Sometimes there would be a dozen or so years of peace. Other times, 2 brides would go missing in the time span of a short month. Before long, a frightening legend rapidly spread around. Within Mount Yujun lived a ghost bridegroom. If he fancied a woman, he would kidnap her during her wedding procession before devouring the party of relatives that were sending her off. Originally, this situation wouldn't be communicated to the heavens. Although there were 17 missing brides, hundreds of thousands of other brides in the world had passed their wedding day safe and sound. In any case, it was impossible to find those brides or protect them now, so people had no other choice but to make do in this event. The families who dared to marry their daughters off in this region merely lessened a bit, and the local newlyweds didn't dare make their weddings a big event. However, it was precisely the 17th bride who had a big shot official for a father. The father doted on his daughter, and when he caught wind of this legend, he meticulously selected 40 brave and outstanding military officials to escort his daughter to her bridegroom. However, despite all of his preparations, his daughter still disappeared. This time, the ghost bridegroom really stabbed a hornet's nest. The official could not find anyone in the human realm who would do anything to help. As a result, he furiously made an alliance with his government official friends and crazily performed a ritual. This official even followed an expert's advice and opened the granary to help the poor. Stop calling me friggin' nobody. 8100 numbers. After making an uproar, he managed to startle a heavenly official. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for those tiny mortal voices to reach a heavenly official's ear. Shi Lian said, "That's more or less the big picture." As the two gods' expressions looked very uncooperative, he wasn't sure if they were listening or not. If they hadn't been listening, Shi Lian didn't have any choice but to explain the situation once again. Yet contrary to what he expected, Nanfang raised his head before wrinkling his forehead. He asked, "Do the missing brides have anything in common with each other?" Shi Lian replied, "There were some rich brides and some poor ones. There were beautiful and ugly ones. Some were wives, others were concubines. In short, the disappearances lack a pattern. One simply cannot determine the preferences of this ghost bridegroom." Oh, now I think my phone's ringing. Yep. Alright, so we're going to take a quick break because my dog needs to walk. Now, I might also grab a snack because I have a feeling we're going to read quite a bit more today because I'm having a good time and having fun. So, be right back. Hello again, folks. I got my cheese toast and my water. Walked my dog. So, main character was explaining the mystery right now, and how there's no pattern connecting the victims of this mysterious ghost bridegroom. Nan Feng grunted once before raising his teacup and taking a sip. See, he seemed to have started pondering their problem. On the one hand, Fu Yao didn't even bother touching the teacup Shi Lian pushed toward him. He just leisurely and continually wiped his fingers with a white handkerchief before asking indifferently, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, how did you decide the ghost is a bridegroom? That can't be certain. No one has seen it before. How can you tell if it's a man or woman or old or young? Are you thinking of things too simply?" Sure, I will make cheese toast for all of you, yes. Have some toast. Shi Lian smiled before answering. The conclusion written on the scroll was a summary by the heavenly officials from Ling Wen's palace hall. The ghost bridegroom is just the popular name used among the people. However, what you've said makes sense. After these exchanges, Shi Lian realized these two martial gods' thought processes were quite sharp. Although their expressions didn't look good, they weren't careless about their work affairs. This made Shi Lian feel considerably gratified. Since the sky outside the window was darkening, the three of them temporarily left the small tea house. Shi Lian put on his bamboo hat before he started to walk. After walking for a bit, he suddenly became aware that the two people behind him hadn't followed. Bewildered, Shi Lian turned around to take a look, before realizing these two were staring at him in bewilderment. Nan Feng asked, "Where are you going?" Shi Lian, replied, "I'm going to search for a place to stay. Fu Yao, why are you rolling your eyes again?" Nan Feng again asked in bewilderment, "Why are you walking toward the mountains and the wild?" Shi Lian was accustomed to frequently eating and sleeping on the streets. As long as he could find a piece of cloth to spread on the ground, he could lie there for a night. Naturally, he was preparing to find a cave and light a fire, something he usually did. It was only after this reminder he remembered. Nan Feng and Fu Yao were martial gods under the palace halls. If there was a temple in their vicinity, they could directly enter it. It wouldn't be necessary for them to sleep outdoors in the wilderness. Poor boy. I need to go write more Chris fanfic since he seems to be going to the dark side. I wonder. We'll see. I've seen all the jokes on Twitter, though, about him looking like he looks like Wesker. In a short while, the three of them found a worn-out, damaged local shrine in an unremarkable and tiny corner. The plate holding the incense was broken, and the whole place gave the feeling it was rarely frequented. The Earth God's name was engraved on a small round stone plaque. Shi Lian called out to him a few times. It had been many years since someone had called or made an offering to this local Earth God. When he suddenly heard someone calling him, his eyes widened. He saw the three of them standing in front of him. Even the area around their bodies was covered with a rich layer of divine light. It was simply impossible to see their faces clearly. Jumping up with great alarm, the Earth God trembled and shivered before asking, "Do the three heavenly officials have any orders for the humble me?" Poor guy's like, "Oh god, big shots just showed up in my temple!" Shi Lian nodded his head in greeting before speaking. "There are no orders. We merely wanted to ask if there were any General Nan Yang temples or General Zhua Zhen temples in this vicinity." Looking for temples to the two gods that the two younger deities work for, so they can go chill in their own house. The Earth God didn't dare to slight them and replied, He calculated on his fingers before saying, "About 5 li from here, there's a temple to provide offerings to General Nan Yang." Shi Lian pressed both of his hands together before replying many thanks. However, the Earth God felt as if he was being blinded by those two dazzling lumps of divine light standing beside Shi Lian. Then he quickly concealed himself. Meanwhile, Shi Lian fumbled around before finding some coins to use as an offering to the Earth God's shrine. Then, upon spotting incense sticks scattered to the side, he straightened them before lighting them up. During the process, Fu Yao had rolled his eyes so many times, Shi Lian practically wanted to ask him if his eyes were tired. So he's being respectful and kind to the shrine, and the younger god's like, oh, this is stupid. Let's just go already, Dad. As expected, 5 li later, which li is a measurement, they spotted a temple. It was erected beside the road, and it looked to be popular and prosperous. Although the temple was rather small, everything one would need was still there. Still, the place bustled with unusual excitement and noise as people came and left. The 3 of them concealed themselves before entering the temple. And sure enough, a godly statue of an armored Nanyang martial god holding a bow was precisely what was located on the altar for offerings. Again, Nanyang is the friend who was angry at him, one of them. The moment Shi Lian saw this godly statue, he went, uh-huh, once in his heart. For a small temple in the countryside, the godly statue itself and the paint on it were quite crude. As a whole, the look of the statue contrasted hugely to Shi Lian's impression of Feng Xin himself. However, most heavenly officials were accustomed to how their godly statues were inaccurately depicted. Don't mention how their own mothers wouldn't recognize them. There were some heavenly officials who couldn't even recognize their own godly statues. After all, there weren't many master artists who had met heavenly officials personally. Therefore, the statues were either beautiful to the extreme or immensely ugly. One could only rely on the statue's specific posture, their weapon, or their garments to recognize which heavenly official the statue was depicting. Generally speaking, the richer the area it was built on, the closer the godly statue would look when compared to the heavenly official themselves. The poorer the place, the more inferior the artist's taste, which would result in the godly statue becoming a truly tragic sight. Until now, only General Zhua Zhen's godly statues were rather nice as a whole. Why? It was because most heavenly officials didn't really care if ugly god statues were made of themselves. However, when Zhua Zhen saw someone make an ugly god statue of himself, he would stealthily break it to make the artist remodel it. Sometimes he would even create a vague dream to express his dissatisfaction with the artist. Thus, after a while, all the believers knew they needed to create a nice-looking statue for their master. Fix it! Your fan art's wrong! So petty. I love it. Members of the Zhuazhen Palace Hall had a personality similar to their generals. All of them were rather fond of paying attention to detail. Within one shichen, I think that's a measurement of time. So, like, within a minute of entering the Nanyang Temple, Fu Yao continuously found fault in the details of the godly statue. It was either the shapes distorted, or the colors of the paint were vulgar, or the technique the artist used was of inferior quality. He even commented on how the artist's tastes were too strange. When Shi Lian saw how the veins on Nanfeng's forehead were slowly bulging, he began thinking about how he should quickly find another topic to divert their attention. Coincidentally, Shi Lian saw yet another young lady come inside to pay homage to Nanyang. As she piously kneeled, he began to talk warmly. All things considered, Nanyang's home ground is in the southeast. I didn't expect the incense burning for Nanyang to be this strong in the north as well. When mortals constructed temples, they were trying to imitate the palace halls in the heavens. The godly statues, on the other hand, were supposed to be reflections of the officials themselves. The gathered believers at a temple and the incense they burnt became a heavenly official's important source of spiritual power. In addition, as a result of every individual's geographical location, history, social customs, class, and many other reasons, people living in different areas normally worshipped different heavenly officials. Every heavenly official's power was strongest on their own turf, which was also known as the home field advantage. Only a deity like the martial god Heavenly Emperor could have believers in every nook and cranny under the sky. He was a heavenly official with temples erected in every direction. So whether or not Zhenwu was on his home ground didn't have any meaning. Nanfang should have been proud that incense was burning so vigorously at a temple not in his general's domain. However, looking at the complexion of his visage, it didn't look like it was a good thing to him. Fu Yao stood to the side and smiled faintly before saying, "Not bad, not bad. General Nanyang receives no small measure of love and respect." Shi Lian responded, "Although I have a question. I don't know." Nanfang cut him off. "If you wish to say I don't know whether it's something suitable to ask, then just don't say it." Shi Lian mentally thought, "No, I wanted to ask. I don't know if anyone could answer it." In other words, so what's going on right now is they've showed up at a temple for the martial god Nanyang, and there's lots of women here, and it's in an area that you wouldn't expect this temple to be because it's not his home turf. And so Shi Lian's like, "This is kind of weird," and he's not sure why. Shi Lian had the premonition that the response to his question would be far from good. Thus, he decided it was still better for him to change the conversation topic once more. Unfortunately, who would have thought Fu Yao would choose to speak up now? "I know what you wanted to ask. You must have been wondering, out of so many believers who'd come here today, why were such a large amount of them women, huh?" That was precisely the question Shi Lian had wanted to ask. A martial god's female believers were always less than the male. Only he had been an exception 800 years ago, and the explanation behind this was very simple. It consisted of only a few words. He was good-looking. Shi Lian thoroughly and clearly understood this fact. It hadn't been because he was a person of virtue and prestige, nor because he was extraordinarily talented. It had been because his godly statues looked nice, and his temples looked nice. Almost all of his temples were built by the imperial household, and his godly statues were made by the top artists across the country. His statues had been carefully sculpted according to his real face. Moreover, because of his phrase, "body in the abyss but heart in paradise," the artists liked adding flowers to his godly statues. In addition, they were fond of turning his temple into a sea of flowering trees. As a result, back then he had another name. Shi Lian was also known as Flower Crown Martial God. Thus, the women loved how his godly statues were pretty and how his temples were filled with flowers. That was enough to make them dash over. Fortunately, they were also willing to come and pay their respects. However, normal martial gods were usually surrounded by heavy killing intent. Thus, more often than not, the appearance of their statues were solemn, fierce, or callous. For female believers, they would rather worship the goddess of mercy, Guanyin? Probably saying that wrong. Rather than stare at statues like that. And although this godly statue of Nanyang was far from releasing killing intent due to its appearance, it was still far from something considered good-looking. Still, there were almost more female believers who came to pay homage to Nanyang than male. In addition, it was clear Nanfang unexpectedly didn't want to answer this question. Thus, Shi Lian found things to be very weird. At that moment, the young girl finished paying homage and got up to light some incense, and she turned around. So in other words, women really love Nanfang for some reason, and Nanfang's disciple is really not wanting to talk about it and feels very awkward. We'll find out why later. Hello, Silent Hill Warrior. You've kind of jumped in the middle of the plot, but we're in ancient fantasy China, trying to solve a murder, sort of. When Shi Lian saw her turn around, he slightly pushed the other two people. Originally, neither of them were resistant to looking. Being pushed like that, they casually followed his gaze. However, this one look made both of their expressions change. Fu Yao yelled, "Too ugly!" Shi Lian choked for a moment before he managed to speak. "You can't say something like that about a girl!" In all fairness, what Fu Yao said was the truth. The young lady's face was incomparably flat, as if someone had flattened it by giving her a hard slap. In addition, if one said her facial features were mediocre, it would cause the word mediocre to feel wronged. If someone had to give her appearance a description, Shi Lian was afraid they could only use the phrase, "a crooked nose." This poor girl. However, Shi Lian absolutely didn't distinguish whether she was beautiful or ugly. The main reason he was looking was when she turned around, a gigantic hole could be seen in the back of her skirt. It was truly impossible to pretend they hadn't seen it. Fu Yao was shocked at first, but quickly calmed down. On the other hand, the pulsing veins on Nan Feng's forehead disappeared without a trace. When he saw how their complexion changed, Shi Lian hurriedly said, "Don't fret, don't fret." After that, the young girl retrieved her incense and kneeled down once more. She began to pay her respects as she started to talk. "Protect us, General Nan Yang. Female believer Little Yang prays that the ghost bridegroom will be captured as soon as possible. Don't let innocent people suffer his evil." She did her worshipping in a truly devout manner, totally oblivious of the hole on her skirt. She was also completely unaware of the 3 people crouching by the foot of the statue she was paying respects to, because they can be invisible because they're gods. Shi Lian felt a headache as he asked, "What should we do? We can't let her leave like this. She'll be seen by everyone on her way home." Moreover, the tear on her skirt looked as if it was deliberately created by someone with a sharp object. Shi Lian was afraid not only would there be people who would come and watch, there would be people who wantonly ridicule her, creating a public spectacle. Something like that would be truly humiliating. Fu Yao replied indifferently, "Don't ask me. The one she's worshipping isn't my general. There wasn't harassment. I didn't see anything." On the other hand, Nan Yang's face just alternated between green and white. He could only wave his hand around and he couldn't say anything. A proper and proud lord was forced into becoming mute. It was clear you couldn't count on him. Thus, Shi Lian had no alternative than to do something himself. After thinking about it for a bit, he took off his outer robe and dropped it. Following a breeze, the robe floated toward the young girl's body before blocking the indecent hole on her skirt. With that done, the 3 of them released a sigh of relief. However, the gust of wind was too perceptible. It scared the young girl and made her look in all directions. She took off the robe, hesitated for a moment before placing it on the stage of the statue. She was still completely unaware of her own situation. Her incense had finished burning, and she began to leave. If they really allowed her to walk out and about, Shi Lian was afraid this young lady would no longer dare to face people because of her shame. When Shi Lian saw the 2 people beside him were just stiff and stiffer, both looking completely useless, he sighed. Nan Feng and Fu Yao only felt the space by their sides empty before they realized Shi Lian had already taken a mortal's form and jumped down. The lights in the temple weren't dark, but they made things look unclear. The jump of Shi Lian's brought another gust of wind, making the flames of the candle flicker. The young girl, Little Ying, only felt as if her sight shimmered before she saw a man emerge from the darkness. The upper part of his body was bare. Thus, when he extended a hand toward her, Little Ying's soul flew away and scattered in fright. As expected, the girl shrieked. Shi Lian was about to speak when she reflexively threw out a slap and yelled, "Harassment!" Which, if a half-naked man appeared out of the shadows and reached for you, you might also be really upset. You're not wrong, Jeff. A very big theme of this story is definitely being judged for doing what's right, not what's easy. And this character follows that trend. The sound of the slap was sharp and clear. When they heard it, the faces of the 2 people still crouching by the statue both began to rapidly twitch in the same way. Although he suffered a slap, Shi Lian was neither annoyed nor angry. He only resolutely passed over his robe before rapidly saying a few words in a quiet tone. Upon hearing him, the girl became shocked. The moment she touched the back of her skirt, her face immediately became red and her eyes filled with tears. One was unable to tell if they were anger or shame, but she firmly grasped the robe Shi Lian gave her before she rushed out of the temple and left. Only Shi Lian's fragile-looking figure was left in the empty temple. When a cool breeze passed through, he suddenly felt a bit cold. Shi Lian rubbed his face before he turned around. Sporting a red handprint on his cheek, he began speaking to the other 2 little gods. "All right, everything's fine now." The moment his voice faded, Nan Feng pointed at him before asking, Did your wound open?" Shi Lian looked down before muttering, "Oh." What was revealed after he took off his outer robe was pretty skin as white as jade. However, his chest was covered completely with layer after layer of white cloth bound extremely tightly. Even his neck and both of his wrists were wrapped with bandages, with countless tiny wounds crawling from underneath the edges of the white cloth. It was truly a shocking sight. After thinking about it, Shi Lian determined that his sprained neck should be fine by now. Thus he began unbinding his bandages. Fu Yao gave him 2 glances before asking, "Who was it?" Shi Lian replied, "What?" Fu Yao elaborated, "Who was the one who fought against you?" Shi Lian, "Fought? Oh, no one." Nan Feng, "Then the wounds on your body?" Shi Lian hurriedly explained, "I fell by myself." They were the wounds he had accumulated as he rolled down from the heavens. If he really had fought against someone, it would be hard to say if he could be even wounded to this degree. Fu Yao muttered something under his breath. Shi Lian couldn't make out what he said, but since it certainly was not praise for him trying to be strong, Shi Lian disregarded it. He just focused on unwrapping the cloth around his neck. Yet the moment he finished, Nanfang and Fu Yao's gazes became so concentrated they practically solidified on his neck. A black collar encircled his snow-white neck. Dun dun dun! Chapter 5. Okay, so we didn't meet What's-His-Face in the last chapter. We are gonna keep reading until we meet the other guy! We have to. First, I finish my toast. Okay, let's see. There we go. Go away. Alright. Okay, so we're on chapter 5. Discussion between three fools in the Juyang Temple at night. Sensing their gaze, Shi Lian smiled faintly before turning around. He asked, "Is it your first time seeing a genuine cursed collar?" The cursed collar, as its name implied, was a curse that took the shape of a shackle. Heavenly officials that were demoted and banished from heaven would receive an imprint of their sins on their body, something that could be considered the accumulation of heaven's wrath. Billy, listen, I had to eat something. I was hungry. Sorry. The imprint took the shape of a shackle, one that blocked the heavenly official's power, and was something one could never break themselves from or lose. It was the same as stamping a tattoo on their face, or binding their hands and feet with chains. It was a type of punishment and also a type of warning, one that made the person in question feel both fear and shame. As the laughingstock of the three kingdoms and one who had been banished from the heavens twice, Shi Lian naturally had this kind of cursed collar imprinted on his body. It was impossible for these two gods to have not heard of this fact. However, there was still a difference between hearing someone say it in passing and seeing it personally with their own eyes. Thus, Shi Lian could understand why the two gods would have that kind of expression on their faces. He guessed this cursed collar had probably made them feel a bit afraid and uneasy. After all, this wasn't the sign of a good thing. Using the excuse he needed a new top, Shi Lian originally wanted to slip outside and walk around. However, that didn't happen because Fu Yao rolled his eyes and said, "It would be utterly obscene of you should you go outside to stroll on the main street with your current appearance." In the end, it was Nanfang who casually grabbed some clothes from the temple for Shi Lian, stopping him from proceeding with his obscene plan. But after Shi Lian tied it up and looked down again, he felt that after the previous events, the atmosphere had become somewhat awkward. Therefore, Shi Lian took out the scroll and the scroll Ling Wen had prepared for him before asking, "Do you guys want to take another look?" Nanfang lifted his head before replying, "I've already seen it. I think he's the one who needs a better look." Fu Yao retorted, "What do you mean I should be the one to take the better look? The scroll didn't have any details. Utterly worthless. Does it even deserve someone to keep reading it over?" When he heard how Fu Yao said the scroll was worthless, Shi Lian couldn't help but feel sorry for the literary gods of the Ling Wen Palace Hall. Those gods wrote so many scrolls, their faces turned ashen in color. Then Shi Lian heard Fu Yao continue to say, "Oh, where did we leave off yet? Oh yes! The reason behind why Nan Yang has so many female worshippers, right?" Okay then. Shi Lian put away the scroll before rubbing the pulsing spot between his eyes. In his mind, he knew that he wouldn't be able to read anything tonight. If no proper work could be done, at least this situation could get cleared up. It turned out that apart from His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, who spent hundreds of years collecting rubbish in the human realm, nowadays all the other gods were aware of why he had so many female worshippers. Nan Yang had once been called the Ju Yang, tremendous masculinity, for some years. The person himself had abhorred this name. Toward what Feng Jin had experienced, other people could only sum up their feelings in words. What injustice. I'm gonna have to explain all this because I think it's a little hard to follow. So, historically, he had a different name as a god, someone accidentally misspelled the name once, changing the meaning of the word, and it led to a change in his reputation. So we're going to learn about that. The original and correct way to spell his name was Zhu Yang, meaning altogether bright, but with a different Chinese character for Zhu. The reason his name had been misinterpreted was because of a small mishap. Many years ago, a monarch wanted to renovate his temples. To show his sincerity, he personally wrote the words on a plaque for every temple hall. However, when he wrote the inscription for the Zhu Yang Palace, he'd somehow misspelled the first word. This time, the official responsible for the temple renovations almost worried himself to death. He couldn't make sense of it. In the end, was His Majesty deliberately changing the name, or had he not been careful and made a mistake? If it was deliberate, why hadn't he made a decree? But if it wasn't on purpose, how could he make this kind of mistake? It wasn't like he could go and say, "Your Majesty, you're wrong." Who knew if His Majesty would think he was mocking his carelessness? Maybe His Majesty would even think he was suggesting his knowledge was superficial and his heart wasn't sincere. The hardest thing in the world was to guess an emperor's intentions. That official was extremely conflicted. After thinking things over, he decided it was better to cause Zhu Yang some grief than make His Majesty feel wronged. One has to admit the official made the right decision. When His Majesty discovered that Zhu Yang, altogether bright, had been changed into Zhu Yang, tremendous masculinity, he didn't say anything. Instead, he invited a whole flock of scholars before vigorously thrumming through the ancient books. After finding countless minor details to justify a reason for the change, they wrote many articles, doing their best to prove the original spelling was tremendous masculinity, and that altogether bright had been the wrong way to write it. In one short night, the whole nation's Zhu Yang temples turned into tremendous masculinity temples. So, what's happened? They were chilling in that one temple, right? And it was the temple to Nanyang, his old friend. And he noticed, the main character, Shi Lian, noticed everybody in the temple was a woman. And he was like, why do women love this dude? And the guy that's a student of the dude was really embarrassed. The other guy, who was a jerk, was like, I know why. I'll tell you why. And they got a little interrupted with the girl walking in. But now, the guy's telling him why women love his temples. It's because, historically, something went wrong where somebody misspelled his name, changing the Chinese meaning from altogether bright, meaning he's like a bright lord, to tremendous masculinity. And he was changed into a god of sex. A god of, yeah, you know. And that's why women love him now. The Fenzin, who'd suddenly gotten a godly title change, didn't find out about this until 10 years passed. He'd never looked carefully at the signs of his own temples before. One day, he was just suddenly very gloomy. Why were there so many women who came to worship his temples? Why was every one of them so shy as they prayed with thoroughly red faces? What kind of things were they beseeching for when they lit the incense? After he found out what happened, Feng Jin rushed to the summit of the firmament, facing the scorching sun and vast sky before swearing a round of curses. After he finished cursing, there wasn't much he could do. If they wanted to worship him, he could let them worship. It wasn't like he could make life difficult for these pious praying women. Thus, he braced himself to listen to their prayers for numerous years. This continued until an honorable monarch felt that this title, Zhu Yang, tremendous masculinity, was scandalous, and thus changed it to Nanyang. However, people had not forgotten that other than just being a martial god, Nanyang was also a god who could offer blessings and protection. Just everyone tacitly understood to never use those two words to address Nanyang. At the same time, other gods mutually knew how to assess Nanyang. You only needed a few words. Everything was good. As long as you didn't make him curse, everything was well. Yeah, so he accidentally got turned into, like, a god of, she describes it later, like, sexual prowess. People go to him hoping for pregnancies, you know, and he, being like a warrior god, is very embarrassed by this. And it all came from having his name misspelled. So Nanfang is his student, and that's why he's embarrassed by this. Nanfang's face had blackened so much it could be compared to an old pot, but Fu Ya was very excited as he spoke. A lady's friend, the most effective when praying for a son, the secret booster for the virality of men, Nanyang, deliverer of children. Shilian benevolently resisted the urge to smile, an attempt to leave some honor to the statue of Nan Yang in front of them. Suddenly, Nanfang spoke in an angry tone. Stop being so weird. If you feel idle, don't panic. Go sweep the floor. The moment he said those words, Fu Yao's face also turned black. If someone said that the thing Nan Yang couldn't tolerate was hearing their previous title, the thing that Zhua Zhen couldn't tolerate was sweeping the floor. This was because when Mu Qing had been doing odd jobs at the temple, back when he was human, what he did all day was deliver tea to His Highness, give him water, and sweep the floor. One day, Shi Lian saw how he would recite cultivation chants while sweeping, and became vigorously moved at how he would take such pains and fight against adversity to study. That was what made him ask the ministers for a favor to receive Mu Qing as their disciple. So in other words, he's insulting this guy with how his god was not once a prince or a warrior, he was a poor kid who swept floors. And that's why sweep the floor is such an insult to that temple. Sure enough, Fu Yao paused a bit before he stared very innocently at Shi Lian, who was waving his hands and standing to the side. Fu Yao smiled sarcastically before saying something like that. People who didn't know would have thought you gods at the Nanyang Palace would have aided His Highness the Crown Prince. Nanfang smiled sarcastically. Your general is indeed someone who would kick their benefactor in the teeth. What more can you say? So now they're throwing insults back at each other because they don't like each other. Shi Lian just wanted to interfere in their argument when Fu Yao started speaking with a chuckle. Your general is only a pot that calls the kettle black. What qualifications do you have to say these words? Shi Lian couldn't take it anymore as the two of them used him as a big stick that hammered the backs of both their generals. He cut in. Stop it! Naturally, no one paid attention to him. In addition, they actually started fighting. Shi Lian didn't know who attacked the other first, but in any case, the table for sacrificial offerings cracked into two halves. The bowl with fruits fell, and the fruits rolled everywhere. Seeing this, Shi Lian figured it was probably impossible to hold them back from fighting. Thus, he sat down in a corner before sighing, how unlucky. He picked up the small steam bun that had rolled to his side. He rubbed it and removed the skin before beginning to eat. However, when Nanfang glimpsed this out of the corner of his eye, he immediately swept out his palm to hit the bun away. Don't eat that! Fu Yao also stopped, before he spoke in a shocked and disdaining manner. It even fell into the ashes. How can you stomach that? Shi Lian took the chance to wave his hands again. Stop. I have something to say. After separating the two martial gods, he began in an amicable manner. The crown prince you're referring to is precisely me. This prince hasn't said anything, so don't use me as your weapon to attack each other. He paused for a moment before adding another sentence. I believe both your generals would never do something like this. For you to lack propriety like this, how would their prestige survive? The moment he said those words, the expressions of the two gods turned strange. Shi Lian continued and said, Second, you're here to help me, right? Then are you guys supposed to listen to me, or am I supposed to listen to you? After a while, the two said, We're supposed to listen to you. Although they said that, their faces looked as if they were saying, Dream on. However, Shi Lian was satisfied with the response. Thus he clapped his hands and said, All right. Lastly, the third and most important thing. If it's necessary to abandon something, please just throw me away. Don't ever throw away food. Meanwhile, Nanfang finally dug out the steamed bun Shi Lian had picked up again and held in his grasp, the one Shi Lian had planned to eat later when he found an opportunity. At the end of his patience, Nanfang yelled, If it fell on the ground, don't eat it anymore! So now we're seeing some of how he is different from other gods because he was poor and had to dig through the trash to survive. He's willing to eat food off the floor. The next day at the tea shop. The tea sommelier was once again sitting at the door, crossing his legs as he relaxed. From far away, he saw three figures slowly approaching. The Taoist, who wore simple white garments and carried a bamboo hat, walked in front, while two teenagers who wore black clothes followed behind him. The Taoist arrived idly with his arms crossed before he spoke, looking even more like an idle person than the tea sommelier himself. The Taoist said, Mister, sorry for the inconvenience, but may I get 3 cups of tea? The tea sommelier replied with a smile, Coming! However, in his heart, the sommelier thought, These 3 foolish people are here again. What a pity! Each one of them looked more respectable than the other. However, their brains are sick. Always talking about this god or that immortal, this ghost or that heaven. These people are all ill, no matter how dignified they look. What was the use when they were like this? So, they've been talking about all these magical things around a normal person who's like, these people have lost their minds. Once again, Shi Lian picked a table beside the window. After they all sat down, Nanfang spoke up. Why do you want to come here to speak about this? Can you ensure others won't hear us? Shi Lian replied in a warm tone. Oh, it doesn't matter. Even if others hear us, they wouldn't do anything. They would only think we're ill. Shi Lian continued to speak. In order to prevent the three of us from squandering our time like before, let's get straight to the point. After calming down, did you guys think of any plans? Fu Yao's eyes lit up as he responded in a cold tone. Let's kill it! Nanfang snorted. No shit! Shi Lian said, Nanfang, you don't have to be this fierce. Fu Yao didn't say anything wrong. The fundamental way to solve the problem is to kill it. The problem is, where do we kill it? Who should we kill? How? I suggest... At this moment, the sound of drums and fanfare once again drifted over the street. The three of them looked out the window. Once again, it was a group of relatives delivering a bride. The procession of both people and horses drummed their instruments as they yelled. Even their shouting had hints of a roar in it, as if they were afraid others could not hear them. Seeing this scene, Nanfang frowned before asking, wasn't it said the native people living around the mountain never dared make a ruckus or throw a big celebration when they married? In the ranks of the procession, the people were all strong, sturdy men. Their expressions and their muscles were stretched taut, as their foreheads were covered in cold sweat. It was as if the thing they were carrying wasn't a marriage sedan filled with joy, but a guillotine that would seize their souls and cut off their heads, forcing them to death. Shi Lian wondered what kind of person was sitting in the marriage sedan. Pondering for a bit, Shi Lian was about to go look when a puff of cold wind blasted over. The curtain on one side of the sedan flowed with the airflow and fluttered upward. The person behind the curtain was using a very strange posture to lie crookedly in the sedan. Her head was also crooked, and what was revealed under the veil was a mouth painted scarlet red. However, the corner of her smile was overly exaggerated. The sedan jolted, and the veil slid down, exposing a pair of round eyes that were firmly staring in their direction. This clearly looked like a woman who had broken her neck and was currently laughing soundlessly at them. Shi Lian didn't know if it was because of the hands of the people carrying the sedan were shaking, for that the sedan wasn't very stable. The woman's head followed the sedan's movements and swayed. It swayed and swayed until, thud, a head fell down and rolled into the street. The headless body also fell forward. With a loud bang, the whole person fell out of the sedan door. Ooh, dun dun. Wow, it's already 2 hours. We still haven't gotten to the part where the guy shows up. Here, I'm gonna look up what chapter he shows up in. Because if it's the next one, maybe I'll do one more chapter. Chapter 8? What chapter are we on? Aw, man. We have 3 more chapters. Oh, well, I guess we're gonna have to stop there because I think my voice will give out if I try to read 3 more chapters. But I'm glad folks enjoyed it. I hope folks enjoyed it. I really like this story, and I think it's a lot of fun. Obviously, especially in the early beginning, there's a lot of history and world building that the writer is trying to get across, and so it kind of gets thrown at you a lot. Once this first kind of wedding procession mystery is solved, it gets a lot slower and easier to kind of digest. But it's a really lovely story. I really enjoy it. We'll definitely read more Monday. I don't know, maybe tomorrow if I feel up to doing something. We'll see. But yeah, thanks again, and I will see you guys later. Bye.